Summer 1940. Europe was in flames. Hitler had crushed nearly every nation in his path, leaving Britain as the last beacon of hope. Bombed, outnumbered, and isolated, Britain faced the might of the Nazi war machine. But how did this desperate struggle turn into the ultimate downfall of Hitler? What alliances, battles, and decisions led to the end of World War II? Today, we are exploring the amazing story of how the Allies beat the odds and took down one of history's most dangerous dictators. If you missed the first part of this series, the link is in the description below. Let's begin.
Britain was the only country left standing against Germany.
We shall never surrender!
In July 1940, Europe looked like this. Adolf Hitler, the dictator of Germany, had taken control of almost all neighboring countries. Austria, Poland, Norway, Belgium, Denmark, France, all of these nations had been invaded by Hitler. To the south, another dictator, Mussolini of Italy, had formed an alliance with Hitler. Both were working together. So, roughly speaking, only three major countries were left in Europe: Germany, the Soviet Union, and Britain. There was a peace agreement between Germany and the Soviet Union. Hitler didn't have to worry about the Soviets because they never attacked Germany. This meant that Britain was the only country left standing against Germany. Across the world, America was avoiding involvement in the war. It was staying away. In such a situation, one might wonder how this scenario changed and how Hitler was ultimately defeated. Hitler believed that with the fighting over, Winston Churchill would want to sign a peace treaty with him. Churchill, however, was not willing to put his country at risk, even with the powerful German army. But the opposite happened. Winston Churchill gave an iconic speech.
We shall fight on the landing grounds. We shall fight in the fields and in the streets. We shall fight in the hills. We shall never surrender!
He made it clear that there would never be a peace treaty between Churchill and Hitler. The war against Germany would continue. This speech indicated that Hitler wanted to invade the UK as well. And indeed, Hitler made the attempt. He planned Operation Sea Lion to attack the British. It was a detailed plan on how to attack Britain. There was no direct land connection between the UK and mainland Europe, so the army couldn't be sent that way. Attempting an invasion by sea was also problematic, as the British Royal Navy had far more ships than Germany. This approach wouldn't work, so Hitler decided to first control the airspace. The German Air Force, Luftwaffe, had 2,600 aircraft. The UK had only 700. That's why on July 10, 1940, Hitler launched an air attack on Britain. The Luftwaffe began by dropping bombs. Initially, their target was to destroy aircraft, airfields, and manufacturing factories. The British Royal Air Force, which was 1/4 the size of the German Air Force, did their best to defend their country. But eventually, the British suffered more losses. Gradually, the Germans started attacking at night as well. One such night was on August 24, 1940, when, by mistake, some German pilots dropped bombs on London, killing many civilians. Winston Churchill thought, "What kind of war is this? They're directly attacking our cities. We'll do the same." The UK retaliated by dropping bombs on Berlin. When Hitler saw this happening, initially he wasn't interested in bombing London. But once he saw that cities were being bombed, he decided to destroy London as well. On September 15, 1940, Hitler ordered the Luftwaffe to carry out an all-out decisive attack. More than 1,000 fighter jets should be sent in one go, and the work should be completed in a single day. Imagine, friends, what people must have witnessed that day. More than 1,000 fighter jets appeared in the skies to drop bombs on your country. Specifically, there were 1,120 aircraft. The British prepared their Royal Air Force. A historic battle took place in the skies that day. The first wave of 100 bombers and 400 fighters was intercepted. Fighting raged all the way from the coast. The British Royal Air Force shot down more than 60 Luftwaffe aircraft. They lost only 29 aircraft themselves. You heard it right. The British successfully stopped the German Air Force's attack. This day is known as Battle of Britain Day. What was the reason behind this? You might wonder how the German Air Force, which was so powerful and had a large number of aircraft, still lost to the British Air Force. The reason is very simple, friends. Whenever a country is attacked and invades another country, the invading country wants to gain something. But for the country that is defending itself, it is literally a matter of existence. If we don't fight with all our might today, then our country will be destroyed. There will be no place left for us to live. This creates a significant difference in the motivation of the soldiers. A recent example of this is the Russia-Ukraine war. When Russia invaded Ukraine last year, everyone thought that within a week, Russia would destroy the entire country. The Russian army was much larger than the Ukrainian army and more advanced technologically, but the Ukrainian soldiers had much greater motivation. That's why Ukraine has been very successful in defending itself. This Battle of Britain Day, friends, was one of the first major defeats for Hitler. For the first time in World War II, Hitler had to face a loss. Hitler knew that the chances of success for this mission were slim, so Operation Sea Lion was postponed, and Hitler shifted his focus from the UK to the Soviet Union. In April 1941, the map looked like this. The countries of Hungary, Romania, and Bulgaria in Eastern Europe had formed an alliance with Germany. They had become part of the Axis powers. Moving further east, Hitler had already seized Yugoslavia and Greece. The Italian dictator Mussolini was actually busy occupying Libya and Greece. But the presence of the British in the Mediterranean was too strong. The Italian forces couldn't handle them alone. So to defeat the British forces, Hitler sent some German troops to fight alongside the Italians in Libya, and with their help, he also seized Yugoslavia and Greece. The interesting thing is that Hitler wasn't particularly interested in invading Britain. He actually wanted to sign a peace treaty with Britain. He thought, why not defeat the Soviet Union first, and once that was done, Britain would be forced to sign a peace treaty out of fear. But why attack the Soviet Union when there was already a peace treaty? The real reason was Hitler's ideology. He hated the communists. Besides that, he believed that if the Soviet Union was seized, Germany would become the #1 superpower in the world, because so much land would come under Germany. Basically, Hitler had become a megalomaniac. He felt that he was the king of the world. Power had driven him mad. He believed that he could achieve anything. He could take over the world. But attacking the Soviet Union was a huge mistake for Hitler. In fact, it became a turning point in World War II. Hitler's plan was very simple. Just like he had invaded France, he intended to invade the Soviet Union. He would divide his German forces into 3 parts. The first part would go from the Baltic region straight to Leningrad, the city where Stalin lived. The second part would attack Moscow, and the third part would attack the south through Ukraine. This operation started on June 22, 1941. The Soviet Union's army was much larger, with 20,000 tanks. The Germans had only 6,000 tanks, but there was a big difference. German technology was much better than that of the Soviets. So the upper hand in this battle was still with Hitler. To save their country, the Soviet Union joined forces with Britain and became part of the Allied powers. Together they planned to send supplies to the Soviet army. A route was decided which would go through Iran. But the problem was that the government in Iran favored Hitler. For this reason, the UK and the Soviet Union joined forces to invade Iran. It didn't help much because, with the help of Hitler's blitzkrieg strategy, in just 2 days, the Germans had already advanced 100 km and occupied a significant portion of Soviet land. In just a few weeks, they had advanced so far that they were only 300 km away from Moscow. At this point, disagreements arose between Hitler and his military commanders. As a result, the next German advance was delayed until October. The cold began to set in. The Soviets had an advantage in the cold weather. They were accustomed to fighting in the cold. On the other hand, the Soviet Union had another advantage. Japan and the Soviets had signed a non-aggression treaty. This meant that the Soviet troops stationed on the eastern border who were fighting against Japan could now be redirected to the west to fight against Germany and defend their country. In December 1941, there was another twist in our story. Suddenly, Japan attacked the Pearl Harbor base in the USA without any provocation. More than 2,300 American troops were killed. Up until this point, America had avoided getting involved in World War II. Seeing what had happened in Europe, America had decided it wasn't their problem and they didn't want to be involved. They had already been involved in World War I. But after this bombing of Pearl Harbor, America felt that it was enough. At this point, America officially declared war against Japan and entered World War II. War now existed between the United States and the Japanese Empire. America joined the alliance with the Allied forces. These included major countries like the UK, Soviet Union, and China. Here you might wonder why Pearl Harbor was attacked. America took a few months to prepare for war. Meanwhile, in early 1942, Japan had already invaded and taken control of several territories. In mid-1942, Hitler decided to focus on the southern part of the Soviet Union. He wanted to cut off the supply chain from Iran. A fierce battle broke out in the city of Stalingrad. The Soviet Union successfully defended itself against the German army. On the other hand, the Allied forces, along with America, attacked Japanese territories in the South Pacific. This battle is known as the Battle of Midway. 4 important Japanese aircraft carriers and supply ships were destroyed in June 1942. Japan's resistance was utterly destroyed. Japan, at the height of its military power, lost not only a major naval engagement but, in a single day, doomed the Japanese Empire to ruin and defeat. By the end of 1942, the British had successfully expelled Italian and German forces from Egypt. The Battle of Stalingrad was a long one. By November 1942, the situation for the German army was becoming increasingly difficult. At one point, the German army had almost captured Stalingrad, but the Soviets kept fighting. The Battle of Stalingrad was one of the deadliest battles. Finally, the Soviet soldiers succeeded. Around 300,000 German troops were encircled by the Soviets, and they surrendered in February 1943. This was the turning point of World War II. A few months later, in July 1943, the common people of Italy pushed their dictator Mussolini out of power. Literally. In Italy, the common people started an anti-fascist movement. Concerned about their situation, the civilians fought against their dictator. Mussolini was killed by an ordinary Italian partisan living in a village. Partisan means the civilian people who take up arms to fight for a cause. A fitting climax to a life of treachery and double cross. He led his country to ruin when he threw his lot in with Hitler. A new government was formed in Italy, and this government decided to stop fighting with the Allied forces. Slowly, the confidence of the Allied countries grew in their efforts to defeat Hitler. In November 1943, Stalin, Roosevelt, and Churchill met in Tehran to discuss how to end World War II. On June 6, 1944, another historic day, known as D-Day, took place. On this day, the Allied forces started a dangerous operation to land on the beaches of Normandy in France. More than 150,000 British, Canadian, and American soldiers landed there. Here they would fight against the German army on the ground and liberate France. A few years earlier, after the evacuation of Dunkirk, it was the first time that the British army was on the ground to fight against the German army. This created a very difficult situation for Hitler. Hitler had asked his army to focus on the Soviet Union. They were suffering losses due to the cold weather and couldn't defeat the Soviet Union. Now, the attack was coming from the Western Front. Hitler decided to withdraw his army from the Eastern Front and focus all his counterattacks on the Allied forces coming from the West. As soon as Hitler withdrew his army from the Soviet Union, a significant counterattack occurred. In just 2 months, the Soviets recaptured almost 600 km of land from the Germans. The countries of Poland, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, and Romania were now under Soviet occupation. On the other hand, the Allied forces also landed in southern France. One country after another started to liberate itself. Hitler's army was being pushed back. Yugoslavia forced the German troops to withdraw on its own. Germany was being attacked from 3 directions. Hitler planned his last major offensive, known as the Battle of the Bulge. In the forest region of Ardennes, the aim was for the German army to push back the Allied forces. Before formally invading Germany, the Allied forces carried out massive aerial bombings on German cities. This offensive reached full fury in a single day of colossal attack. It was the greatest Allied air offensive since D-Day. In February 1945, a Yalta conference was held in Crimea. It was announced that any country declaring war on Germany could join the attack on Germany. Venezuela, Uruguay, Turkey, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Syria, Lebanon, and Paraguay all declared war on Germany. The last 4 months of World War II were the most painful. Almost 30,000 people were killed every day. As the Allied forces advanced, they discovered Hitler's concentration camps, where millions of innocent Jews had been brutally killed. The Allied bombings of German cities continued. Later, some people criticized this, saying it was unnecessary to bomb German cities where many civilians were killed. Cities like Dresden were completely destroyed. It is said that when Hitler could have been defeated on the ground, what was the need for such bombings? By this point, it was clear that Hitler was going to lose. Finally, in May 1945, Berlin was surrounded by the Soviet army. Exactly 2 days before this, on April 30th, 1945, Hitler committed suicide. On May 8, 1945, Germany formally surrendered. The Union Jack was raised to signal the British troops' takeover of their sector of Berlin. The date was July 6, 1945, a date the history books will remember. The German territories were divided. East Germany and West Germany were formed. A new Poland was created from a large part of East Germany, and the borders of many countries were redrawn. Today, the map of Europe looks like this because of World War II. Before this, the map was entirely different. When a new government was formed in Germany, it joined hands with France. The centuries-old enmity between these two countries finally came to an end. In the beginning, to increase cooperation between these two countries, a European Coal and Steel Committee was formed to facilitate trade in coal and steel. A few years later, countries like Italy and Britain became part of it. Trading was taken to the next level, and eventually, in the year 2000, the European Union was formed, an organization that eliminated borders between European countries. And thanks to this, there has been no such war in Europe since World War II. In October 1945, the United Nations was also established to ensure that there would never be another world war. After this, the World Bank, IMF, and NATO were set up. This is why, friends, you might have noticed that the permanent members of the United Nations are those who were part of the Allied forces in World War II. An interesting fact that I haven't told you yet: after Germany's surrender, World War II didn't end. Japan still took 2 more months to surrender. In July 1945, Japan was given an ultimatum to surrender, but this ultimatum was ignored, after which America dropped atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. World War II now ended. If you enjoyed the video, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. And don't forget to share this video. Thanks for watching.